Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me today. Earlier this year, we covered in a special report how domestic terrorism is rising in the United States and white supremacy is becoming a growing threat. I'm going to play you a snippet of part of that special report where we covered some examples of the domestic terrorist cases in the U.S. What happened in Idaho yesterday is an example of the growing cases in domestic terrorism in the United States, in terms of how far this is stretching and the people and the entities that they are targeting. On May 21st, 2025, Elias Rodriguez, 31 years old, of Chicago, opened fire outside the Jewish National Museum in downtown D.C. 2 Israeli embassy employees were killed as they left the event. On May 17th, 2025, Guy Edward Bartkus, 25 years old, drove a car packed with a bomb into a Palm Springs facility in California, at a California clinic, and he detonated it. This was a California fertility clinic. The blast killed Bartkus himself, and it wounded numerous bystanders. It destroyed the clinic and damaged surrounding buildings. Investigators determined that Bartkus was motivated by extreme anti-natalist ideology. On June 1st, 2025, Mohammed Sabri Solomon, an Egyptian national, attacked a pro-Israel hostage support rally in downtown Boulder, Colorado. 12 people were wounded. He had a flamethrower. On June 4th, an FBI SWAT team raided a residence near Lacey, Washington, finding a massive amalgamation of weapons linked to extremist activities. Law enforcement seized over 35 firearms, including rifles and an MG-42 machine gun, grenade launchers, explosives, body armor, and Nazi paraphernalia from a home that was reportedly occupied by 2 U.S. military service members. Both men were arrested on state firearm charges and held on essentially a $500,000 bail. Local authorities described them as linked to Nazi white nationalist efforts and possibly plotting violent action. Federal domestic terrorism charges are expected. No incident had occurred yet, but essentially the stockpile indicated that they were preparing for something big. They were preparing, to have a mass murder situation. I mean, look at that. All of these weapons, all of this was seized by the feds. On June 12th, 2025, Gregors Vanderberg, 48 years old, of Texas, attempted to purchase powerful fireworks and gunpowder at a New Mexico travel center. ATF agents say Vandenberg explicitly said he planned to use them to build bombs to target law enforcement and government officials during protests in Los Angeles. He claimed to be ex-special forces and expressed intent to, quote, kill law enforcement officers. This is just this year. All of these cases are just this year. Recently, authorities found 3 improvised explosive devices placed in public parks in Sorata, a suburb of Tucson, Arizona. On June 13th and June 20th, anonymous citizens reported essentially taped cylinders in a playground and a walking trail. The FBI and the ATF have treated them as confirmed bombs. Local sheriff's officials warned that the devices were highly dangerous and could kill civilians. No group has claimed responsibility for this. No suspects have yet been publicly identified, and no injuries have occurred. The devices were disarmed by bomb squads. The incident essentially remains under investigation as potential domestic terror plots against the public. On June 14th, a 57-year-old Vance Bolter carried out 2 coordinated assassinations at the homes of Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota. Impersonating a police officer, he entered the home of Democratic State Senator John Hoffman, shooting both him and his wife. They were shot up to 9 times, and miraculously both of them survived. He then proceeded to go to the home of former Speaker of the House in Minnesota Melissa Hortman. He shot her and her husband, killing them both. As it turns out, he was a Trump supporter and had a list of other Democratic elected officials that he wanted to murder as well. Investigators found Bolter had body armor, multiple assault rifles, and notebooks listing dozens of elected officials. So we are contending with all of this as once as a country. The multitude of domestic terrorism cases in this country is staggering, and it's only growing. I mean, just go back to that case for 2012, for instance, what happened there. It has only grown since 2012. The broad list of domestic terrorism in the United States. This is something that has gotten worse. White supremacist violence, neo-Nazi violence in this country. People plotting against the government. People plotting to do harm to civilians en masse. That is growing in this country. It is getting bigger and bigger. And this is happening under an administration that has effectively endorsed this type of violence, that has joked about things like this happening in the past, and that tells its supporters that it is completely okay to carry out this type of visceral violence against the opposition party.
After the deadly Walmart shooting there, we have now learned the names of all of those killed in that attack. 22 people are now dead after 2 more victims died at the hospital yesterday. At least 7 of those killed are Mexican citizens. The city of El Paso sits at the U.S.-Mexico border. Police say the alleged gunman posted a racist manifesto online before the shooting. In it, he denounced the growing Hispanic population in Texas.
We spoke with one immigrant who says she feels the president's language, which is echoed in the manifesto, enables violence like this.
I think that when you have a president who says bad things about immigrants, especially from South America and Central America and Mexico, it just opens opportunities.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
This morning, the hammer-wielding intruder who allegedly broke into the Pelosi home through a back door, facing attempted homicide charges after striking 82-year-old Paul Pelosi in the head. The House Speaker has been spending time at the hospital with her husband, who's recovering from life-threatening injuries.
Together we will take on the ultra-left-wing liars, losers, creeps, perverts, and freaks who are devouring the future of this state like a swarm of locusts. And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know?
So this is a crisis that has become almost uncontrollable in the United States. Really a reality that we have to confront. A reality of white supremacy and racism that is so deeply embedded into our institutions, into our system in this country, that we need to have an honest discussion about domestic terrorism. We need to have an honest discussion about its roots, its perpetrators, and its history. 3 years ago, I spoke with Dr. Alon Milwicki, a professor of history and an expert in this field. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, I spoke with him again. He is now at the Southern Poverty Law Center, and this was our interview. Joining me now for the interview is Dr. Alon Milwicki. He is a senior research analyst on anti-Semitism at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
So, over the past few months, and just of course in recent weeks, we've seen a rise of domestic terrorism here in the United States. Of course, there was recently the assassination of a Minnesota lawmaker in her home, as well as her husband. We saw 2 others who were also injured, but they survived, as well as a situation in Idaho with, shooting at firefighters. Under this administration, we've seen them really, I guess like peel back the lens when it comes to addressing domestic terrorism and leaving it up to the states now and getting rid of domestic terrorism prevention databases. What do you make of that, and how that encourages this type of violence to continue?
I don't know if it necessarily encourages the violence to continue because the violence is already there.
Hmm.
It's whether or not it's tracked by the federal government or the state government isn't going to affect, I would argue, whether it's going to occur. That's I mean it's I think it's foolhardy at best to remove those monitoring systems, but the real question that needs to be addressed is more so why are there like more shootings than days in 2025 so far or something,
Mm.
like why is there such an abundance of taste for gun violence or political violence uh, in today's America? And it's yes, it's been something that's become more and more clear over the past few months, but it's been something that's been part of America for quite a long time now. It's the violent political rhetoric or the dismissive political rhetoric that was once fringe, or even social rhetoric that was once fringe, is no longer. It's considered acceptable. It's considered. I mean, we've had two recent, leaders of, organizations who just seek Heiled, and we just sort of glossed over it as a society. Like that's just like, it happens,
Hmm.
and that's more of uh more evidence of like a systemic issue than something more recent, I would say, if that makes sense.
When you talk about, or when you just look at the normalization of extremist talking points, in mainstream politics, or, people like Elon Musk, doing, Heil Hitler, when you see stuff like that in the way that it sort of has merged into one of the major political parties in this country, what is the danger, of that type of rhetoric?
Well, you just said it, normalization. When extremism becomes normal, what's extreme anymore?
Hmm.
Like when if extremism is just the regular actions of a political party, then it's no longer it's no longer considered extreme. It's considered normal. And then what was once considered something that was taboo or that could get you thrown out of office. I mean, we're well beyond the point where something that could have gotten someone thrown out of office, even like 10 years ago would get them thrown out of office now. Like that doesn't exist anymore. Those norms, those, whether they're cultural, political, or societal norms, they're coming crashing down around us. So the effect is, you know, cruelty, hatred, violence become, I mean, people are selling merchandise for alligator Alcatraz or taking pictures next to the sign. And, you know, to them, to those people who are doing that, like the people who are in prison there aren't people.
Hmm.
They're being diminished and dehumanized, right? So it's no longer about, I mean, it's part of the ongoing divisiveness we've seen in this country for, again, probably the majority of this century, where it's no longer my fellow American, it's us versus them, whoever the them is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what we're seeing right now with this anti-immigrant rhetoric, of course, xenophobic, it's nothing new in regard to American history, but it is something that is, has always been there, maybe, under the wraps for a bit, but it's always been there. And I just wanted to get your opinion on what's happening right now in terms of these mass deportation raids, and of course, this the rhetoric that we're hearing from members of the White House, like Stephen Miller, of course, anteing up this sort of white supremacist ideology, that this
Oh,
country has to be rid of immigrants.
I would direct you to SBL's file on Stephen Miller. I mean, he's an atrocious human being. But yeah, it's I mean, you're right. It's nothing new. I mean, we did this in the 1920s,
Mhm.
with the Johnson-Reed Anti-Immigration Act. If you read some of the political discourse of the time, the way that they referred to immigrants in that time is strikingly similar to the way we talk about immigrants today. We dehumanize them. We diminish we diminish the fact that America was, and forever will be an immigrant country,
Mhm.
right? We fall back on some kind of nativist talking points that were popular in the 1920s and the 1820s that have never really gone away. Something about the nature of true America, true Americanism, 100% Americanism. These are all extremist ideas because the whole facet of, you know, a question I used to ask my class is when I was teaching would be like, what is an American? What makes an American? If it's not citizenship, as some of these people say, or a green card or whatever, what makes an American? Right? And if there's varying answers of what makes an American, then you don't have the right to stand firm and say, this is it, end of discussion. Right? That's the whole
Mm.
thing about social constructs, the finite definition. What it means to be American changes. If we go past the idea of simply just citizenship, right? If your idea goes beyond citizenship, if American ideals go beyond just being a citizen, well, then you need to be very clear what you're talking about. And unfortunately, a lot of people talk about notions like America for Americans or America first. I mean, look, the idea of America putting its own interests first is fine because every other country does it. So why shouldn't we? However, the notion of America first, the concept, the phraseology, the slogan,
Mhm.
that's not a Trump thing.
Yeah.
Klan marched on that in the 1920s. There's big old pictures of that. And they were very clear on who they meant America was and what
Mhm.
America is. So you need to be very clear about these dog whistles and whether they are in fact just dog whistles or are you telling the truth? And
Yeah.
you, like your Steve Banks, like your Stephen Millers, have a pretty finite idea of what it means to be an American. And that's kind of becomes a problem.
Mm. If white supremacy has been delineated by the FBI and other, intelligence agencies as such a large problem, as such a major issue in the United States, why is it treated differently when it comes to, as opposed to something like, as Islamic extremism? Why is it treated differently? It's almost like you have like kid gloves on it. So I'm interested in getting your opinion on that.
Well, it was. Previous FBI administrations had said the number one domestic terrorist threat was white supremacist,
Mhm.
white supremacy, domestic terrorism. That is not the case anymore, what they say. They are incorrect. The largest, there are statistics beyond, what I have at my fingertips that illustrate that radical Islamic terrorism or Islamic terrorism, however they refer to it, isn't the most dangerous threat to this country in terms of domestic terrorism. And it hasn't been, but it is a good talking point, right? Because how are you going to get white America angry at white Americans? You can't do
Mm.
that, but you can get them angry at difference. And the Muslim community has difference in spades because of religion, because of ethnicity, because of country of origin, because of skin color. And that's a target you can place. And it's not just the federal government that's doing it. Despite all of the I don't know anything about Project 2025 stuff, we've seen Project 2025 emerge under this administration pretty clearly. What else is, and I've written about this myself and other analysts have also written about it, is Project Esther. And Project Esther basically says and this gets into my research specifically because Project Esther has to do with anti-Semitism. Project Esther, from the Heritage Foundation, pretty much says point blank, the number one threat to Jews is Muslim people. And that's just not true. That's just not true. And it hasn't been true. Project Esther also seems to claim that after Israel's creation, white supremacy in America towards Jews kind of died away. Again, not true. Is there Muslim anti-Semitism? Sure. I mean, that's of course there is. Is there black anti-white? Is there white anti-Asian? I mean, there's everything. But in terms of dominant racial, racist, or even domestic terrorist ideologies or theologies, the prominent ones in America are white supremacists. They have been for centuries.
There appears not to even be right now a national discussion, addressing this seriously. But it's also, I feel, one of my big concerns is that with the regressions and, of course, in federal acknowledgement of the threat and the truth of domestic terrorism, there also remains no effort to, have de-radicalization. That's not happening at all. So with these groups becoming more radical and more extreme, what does that threat look like in 5 years or 10 years as this just grows unchecked?
I'm going to be busy.
Mm.
Well, first, there are groups that do focus on de-radicalization. There are, and they do exist, but they're not necessarily government funded.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they receive any government money, but they do exist. And they do fantastic work. SPLC does a lot of also education and prevention. We have a whole department, designed for prevention. And they do fantastic work. They do amazing work. And for prevention, I mean prevention of radicalization. So they do exist. But if you're asking if the government is going to sponsor it, no, I don't think the government is going to sponsor it at this point. And what does it look like 5, 10 years from now? As a historian, and as we've already pointed out, we've been here in this sort of situation, at least rhetorically, before, right? We've seen this kind of anti-immigrant sentiments. We've seen this kind of anti-Semitism, and I'm talking just in America. We've seen anti-immigrants. We've seen anti-Muslim. We've seen anti-Semitism. We've seen anti-LGBTQ. We've seen it all. What makes this moment different, I would argue, is one, the sheer volume of social media, right? Two, the complete and utter erosion of trust and expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Three, the ability for non-credentialed, for lack of a better term, experts to be seen as experts, and to wield such powerful influence. And four, a disassociation with the importance of studying social sciences in schools. And that includes everything from history to humanities. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say history because I'm a historian. But social sciences, sociology, psychology, all of these things are of the utmost importance. And we've seen a concerted attack, not just on public education, but look at universities now. They're under siege completely right now for social science, for honest, open, discussive education, which the current administration isn't really a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're just not. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, no, absolutely. And with regard to what you just said about the attack on universities and broader, of course, book bans and just this effort to have revisionist history, because certain information related to race riots or genocide of the past, makes white people feel uncomfortable. When you begin to have those conversations about what's going on and the effort to erase that history, what are those dangerous implications of that also contributing to that type of violence as well?
The more we see each other as less than, the more propensity to violence there is.
Hmm.
Because if you're attacking something that isn't on your level or seen on your level, then it doesn't fall into the same laws, right? That's an excuse that's been used forever, right? If you're different, if you're less than, then you can be enslaved, you can be imprisoned, you can be interned, you can be rounded up, blah, blah, blah. You fill in the blanks. If you can convince a population that another group of people is less than, I mean, the crappiest thing is that the greatest gift you can give any group is someone to blame for their problems. If you can say to somebody, no, 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 it's not your fault that this is happening, that you lost your house, or that the economy is bad, or that blah, blah, blah. It's not your fault, it's theirs, whoever the they is. And it can be anybody, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Jews, it happens quite frequently. They point the finger at Jews and say it's because of Jewish people, right? It's still a consistent theme in American
Hmm.
history. It's because of Jews that the economy is doing this. It's because of Jews that Jeffrey Epstein's island existed or whatever. It's because of Jews that blah, whatever. You fill in the blanks. Makes it easier to delineate a Jewish person, whatever they look like, as less than, so that you're not actually killing a person or attacking a person. You're solving a problem.
Mm.
You're doing you're doing you're doing justice. And a lot of the people who rise to the defense of, and I know I'm getting into Jewish people here, but this is my expertise, or anti-Semitism, but a lot of people who rise to this defense of Jewish people aren't actually Jewish defenders. You get Christian nationalists like Sean Feucht, for example, whose only care about Jewish people and Israel is the fulfillment of Christian prophecy. He wants to protect Jews. He doesn't give a damn about Jewish people, Jewish identity, and so many of these Christian nationalists don't give a damn about any of it. The only thing they care about is the existence of Jewish people, the continued existence of Israel for the purposes of the second coming or the Christian nationalist agenda. That is it. They do
Mm.
not care. And that's the problem it's like you get these false friends, right? Where it seems that you have people, and this happens in other communities as well, where people seem to have your back, but they have their own agenda. And it's important to sniff out those people because they're just as likely to turn their back on
Yeah.
you. It's just a bit of an aside, but if you would have asked me, hell, maybe if you'd have asked me when we first talked, what was it, like 3, 4 years ago?
Yeah. About so.
If you'd asked me when we first talked, what I think would have been easier to turn back or to help, extremism or ignorance, I probably would have said ignorance
Mm.
because I would have said as an academic teaching, blah, 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 blah. But in the current world, ignorance is so willful, it's
Yeah.
so dug in, and it has such silos of reinforcement. And I have seen extremists reform. I have seen that. Because the notion is if you can be taught an extremist idea, you can be taught a different idea. Someone has to buy into extremism. So you could buy into something else. These people, the general people or whoever who are so willfully ignorant, are so focused on blocking out other voices
Hmm.
that it is impossible to change their minds.
Yeah.
There is no discourse. And that's currently where we're at right now, Jeremiah, where we live in a society that is so siloed off from each other where people don't want to engage in discourse. And if they do, especially on topics like this, often enough, it's to trap them.
Yeah,
It's to
exactly.
and again, why I fall back on, and look, I might be an analyst now, but once an academic, always an academic. The only way through this is open, honest, discussive education. And the way that I know that that's true is look what they're coming after more than anything else. Look what the authoritarian impulses in this country are coming after more than anything else. And that is open, honest, discussive education, publicly funded universities. They are coming after that education more than anything else because it is that type of education that promotes growth, that promotes change, that promotes diversity, that promotes equity, that promotes inclusion. That's not what whoever these individuals are with this authoritarian tendencies, be it the current administration, be it Christian nationalist leaders, whoever, they don't want that. They don't
Exactly.
want that at all.
Because their goal is division, and ultimately to thrive on that division, because unity, you can get, like I always say, if you can get a population that's educated, then they're less willing to obey something like this because their understanding of the past and civic, we're seeing huge
Not
attacks
just
on.
that. It's not just that. It's because one of the primary functions of an educated person is to question.
Yeah,
And if you can stop people from questioning, which we've done in this country over the past 25 years, you can make it that questioning is taboo or radical or whatever, you know? The
exactly.
foundation, the foundation of education is question, right? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good. I feel like this also goes into something that I've been hearing a lot of people say, and it's that we no longer, as a society in the United States, have a collective interest to want to learn more. Of course, because there is this actual fear or entrapment when it comes to discourse now. I feel like we're living in a society of like this anti-intellectualism
Oh,
movement. And that is horrifying because people aren't willing to learn just anything at all. And they're also becoming more, ignorant of the past, thinking that it doesn't apply. When absolutely we are living through reiterations of the
doesn't make
past
you
right now.
money.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make you money. And it's I've heard this said to me before, and this kind of encapsulates all that you're saying. So I got a PhD in American history, right? Been studying racism, and my focus has been, like, as you know, white supremacy, Christian identity movement, right? I was told once, I want to say like 2 or so years ago, when I was asked my opinion on something, uh, and it was against what this individual who had, and I'm not knocking it, had a high school education, and that was it. And he was about 10 years younger than me. And he said, don't you think the fact that you have a PhD makes you too biased and you don't really understand what's real? And you don't recognize your own bias. And I was like, so what you're telling me is having more education makes you more ignorant? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, what a wonderful way to live,
Mm,
right? Like, what a wonderful, like, completely just bubbled way to live. And that just sort of encapsulated what we're talking about here is the notion that people, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here and everything, but the notion that people with educations who have done the work are somehow dismissed over talking heads, over loud personalities, and people with likes, that education is now seen as like a pathway to ignorance, a pathway to bias. Even though, as I just said, our number one job as academics is to question.
Yeah.
Like that's the reason why histories are always revised and re-edited. Like in the 1940s, when they wrote about the Klan, they didn't, a 1920s Klan, they didn't have all the information that we do now.
Mhm.
We know more now. So we can look at a book written in the 1960s, 1970s, and be like, okay, let's revisit that book and say, and I'm not saying I'm condoning the movement of historical revisionism, which is what the Holocaust revisionists call themselves. No. Okay. But a fundamental part of studying history is recognizing that if we learn, or not even history, I mean, it's science. I mean, we thought the Earth was the center of the universe for how many years, you know? And then, oh crap, we learned something new.
Mm-hmm.
Like all those people saying it used to be called global warming, now it's called climate change. Well, yeah, we learned something. Or people saying that like, you know, more people are being diagnosed with autism, so it's a scam. No, we know more about it. We understand
Exactly.
the spectrum now. We understand it, you know? So like more diagnoses or more understanding doesn't mean less progress. It means more progress.
Exactly.
So like I said, it's like this wonderful bubbled way to live where you just think that education is a threat and that, I don't know, the person with the largest following online is somehow an expert.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
And
that
I feel like
speaks to,
that's
again, a lack of media literacy, a lack of actual literacy. I mean, a lack of education, a de-emphasis on education is what it's like that, exactly how you said it, an anti-intellectualism.
yeah.
But it's not just like it's people like me who's a quote unquote intellectual. It's more like an anti-education.
Yeah.
Right? It's more of an anti-education, and that goes for K through 12. You know, you have these groups like Moms for Liberty and all of them who are trying to take control, who have been trying. There are so many, you know, of these like radical educational extremists who are trying to like look at things like DEI or diversity and then paint them as like Charlie Kirk and all of these people are trying to paint them as like unfair and negative, and like they're so good at using buzzwords. I mean, like Charlie Kirk has like a nothing education, and people see him as like this authority on what?
Exactly.
On what?
Exactly.
Like I love like on what? Like why are you an authority? Because you started a company and you called it TPUSA and you didn't recognize that like for most of my generation TP is toilet paper? I'm just saying. Just saying. Well, it's nice to see a little Gen X Zennial humor getting through to the new generation. Because every time I see TPUSA, I'm just like, dude, it's worth toilet paper.
Oh my gosh. Every day we're bombarded with headlines, loud, confusing, and sometimes designed to distract. But behind those headlines is a truth worth fighting for. I'm Jeremiah Patterson, host of The Jeremiah Patterson Show, and for the past 7 years, I've committed myself to uncovering what's real, what's right, and what's too often ignored. From breaking news and deep dive investigations to untold stories in history and today's fight for democracy, this work is my purpose. I don't just report the news, I care deeply about it and what it means. But to keep this work going and growing, I need your support. When you become a paid subscriber to the Jeremiah Patterson Show on Substack, you're not just backing independent journalism, you're fueling truth-telling in a time of disinformation. You're helping amplify voices the mainstream media too often leaves out, and you're joining a community that believes facts still matter. You'll get exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insight, and subscriber-only shows like the Unfiltered podcast and the Resistance one as well. But more than anything, you'll be part of a mission to inform, to expose, and to resist. I do this work because I love it. I do this work because it matters. And I do this work because it is essential. Because I believe journalism should serve people, not power, and because the truth still matters. So if my work has ever informed you, inspired you, or made you think, please consider becoming a paid subscriber today on Substack for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Now back to the show. Okay, so I wanted to speak to you about the technology aspect of this. Recently, we have seen Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok started calling himself Mecha Hitler.
Yeah.
What role do online spaces, particularly encrypted and fringe platforms, but also mainstream platforms like, X, play in radicalizing and mobilizing domestic terrorists?
Well, I don't know about, I can't speak to like exactly domestic terrorists because
Or like extremist ideology.
if we're, right, if we're classifying domestic terrorists as people who actually commit acts of terror, that's something that's beyond sort of my purview. I mean, that doesn't
Mhm.
mean the extremists I monitor don't commit acts of terror because some of them do. But yes, it goes a long way. Uh, you can find confirmation for any thought process on social media.
Hmm.
You don't have to look far. You can create your own silo, your own group of people who you follow, and whether it's on Twitter, I refuse to call it X, whether it's on whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on VK, Gab, or any of these places, it is very easy to find and or create your community. And if that community is based around anti-Semitism, anti-Islam, anti-LGBTQ, racism, nativism, anti-immigration, it's not hard. It's not hard. So it plays a massive role because it doesn't require interpersonal relationships. It doesn't
Hmm.
even require interpersonal skills. I mean, the explosion of the manosphere and misogyny is a perfect example. That's not one of my areas of expertise, but some of my colleagues at SPLC study that and write about it. And that space is all online. Um, so it's a problem. And I don't know what the future looks like in regards to AI. I know that I'm glad I'm not a college professor right now because it's way too easy to use AI, teach it to write your way and all that stuff. It's way too easy. Uh, but yeah, I mean, consider the source. Like that being said, Grok just got like a multi-million-dollar contract with the federal
Yeah.
government, despite the Trump Musk rift, uh, and despite Grok showing anti-Semitic tendencies, or showing anti-Semitic Mecha Hitlerism, whatever you call it. Uh, it's still got a contract. So, I mean, again, it goes back to speaking of our values and the moment we're in right now, as we were discussing earlier, where, if you've got a Grok chatbot to tell you what is and what isn't, why do you need to talk to anybody who has experience or expertise?
Exactly. Exactly. I wanted to ask you about something that we've seen recently, even more of. Spectrum has recently said that on Monday of this week, um, they saw a 200% increase in attacks on its cable infrastructure so far this year in Missouri, calling it an act of domestic terrorism. We've sort of seen this throughout the decade and throughout the country for a while. Essentially, white supremacists wanting to attack cable infrastructures or network towers to start a race war. What do you make of that?
That. I mean, I got nothing more than that, bro. Like, I don't even know what the thought process is. I mean, there were other groups that tried to attack power stations and things like that.
Mhm.
You know, bring us back to the dark ages or something. I don't know. I think those people don't understand how like science, electricity, you know, Bluetooth, or it's like they just don't understand how any of this stuff actually works. Like, okay, so you shut down a power station. All right. Like what is that movie? Which Die Hard is it? It's like Die Hard 8 or something, where like the dude does it and like you bring the city to its knees, you know, or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. It
I know.
was a Die Hard. That's all I got. I got. I mean,
Tim,
I'm sure you can classify some of the like. I don't know anything about the Spectrum attack, and I don't know much about these groups that you're talking about that are like anti-technology or whatever. But like, sure. I mean, if they go out and destroy something, what's ironic is like a lot of these like the contradictory nature of extremism is just like so bizarre to me. Like they're they believe that taking down technology will end the world, and how do they get their message out? Through using technology. You know, or like one of my favorites is like I mentioned one of the platforms that extremists use called VK, which is a Russian-based platform, and the
mm,
most hyper-nationalistic groups like the Ku Klux Klan live on that platform.
mm.
How are you using a Russian like just like think about it for a minute. Just like,
Oh,
you know, it's just the it's like if you take it's like one of the reasons why historians will say like the 1920s Klan rose so spectacularly and fell equally spectacularly is because they were inherently contradictory. They were both private and public. They were both like secret and mysterious and like ordinary at the same time. They would host these like, you know, clandestine meetings, but then have like neighborhood barbecues, you
yeah,
know. Uh,
exactly.
this doesn't make any sense, you know. So, like when you expose the contradictory nature of extremism, there's a bit of a like, I don't know how if you could put words to the facial expressions I was making. That's kind of whatever that word for those faces I was making is. That's a common thing we see in studying extremism. We're just like, hey,
Yeah.
all right.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you here, in regard to the work that you've done over the years, as well as the Southern Poverty Law Center, when it comes to the research that has been done on, just the history and the ideology behind domestic extremism and the threats that we face as a country, what keeps you hopeful in this time, or are you more so pessimistic these days? I know that's, yeah.
I'll never be out of work. So,
I feel like that's the sad part, though,
that's
that you'll
totally
never
sad.
be out of work.
That's a sad part. The fact that like we were just talking about the contradictory nature and whatnot. There is still a part of me that I'm not going to say believes in a fundamental goodness of people because I think that that's a little bit trite, but
Hmm.
believes in trends or fundamental trends in history. things always ebb and flow. Okay, there's always peaks, there's always valleys. Part of the reason why, like if I, let me speak to anti-Semitism. That's my expertise. Let me speak to that. You know, I've been asked in the past couple of years, even before October 7th, anti-Semitism was at a high. But in the post-October 7th world, you know, I was asked by a bunch of people, like on a scale of 1 to 10, where's anti-Semitism? And I would say it's at a 10, right? But see, the problem is with regards to anti-Semitism, when we get to one of those valleys, it drops from a 10 to a 7. 0 to 7 is fine with us. A 7 is normal for us. That's the acceptable level of anti-Semitism we as a country are comfortable with. We never drop below that.
Wow.
And the reason you know that is because whenever it surges, it doesn't have to look far. And I know I'm giving it like, you know, what I'm like anthropomorphizing it here, but like it doesn't have to look very far on what to build on. It's already there. The foundation is already so firm that it just has to go from 7 to 10. That's not hard. That's just 3. Getting from 0 to 10, that takes time. That takes change. We are so well accustomed to 7 that when it drops back down to 7, and it will, anti-Semitism will die back down to a 7, and suddenly anti-Semitism will no longer be in the public discourse. It'll no longer be a useful tool of the right, because they had a House hearing today on anti-Semitism, and 90% of those hearings are not about anti-Semitism at all. It's about how you can use anti-Semitism to attack other communities.
Exactly.
Which is called instrumentalization, it took me about 3 months to learn how to say that word. So again, even professors can learn.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually. Sorry, I know I'm cutting in here, but I wanted to ask you about that, actually.
No, go ahead, man. I'm just like rambling.
We've seen the Trump administration go after universities and say that, okay, the reason why we're attacking
nothing
you
to do with anti-Semitism
is because of anti-Semitism, but they don't actually care about that.
No. They care about how useful it is as a tool. And you have to look at stuff that Trump has said in the past. He basically said to a group of Jewish people at a conference, I forget which organization it was, you know, if we lose, it'll be because of you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, check out the anti-Semitism resource on SPLC's anti-Semitism page. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of we accomplished there. It's going to get updated in the next 2 months, but you'll see the way that we talk about it is not as dogmatic as other organizations do. Because to think about anti-Semitism, to think about racism, to think about anti-LGBTQ as anything other than fluid, to give something like that a finite definition is to ignore the fact that it changes the implementation of it, the definition of it, how it operates changes over time. The way that we look at what is anti-Semitic today was not anti-Semitic, or might not have been viewed as anti-Semitic 30 years ago, might not have been viewed as anti-Semitic 50 years ago. 50 years ago, nobody was talking about George Soros.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody was talking about it. They're talking about it now. And now it's one of the most common anti-Semitic tropes. You know? The way that they talk about globalization today is not the same way that we talked about globalization a few years ago. Right? There are all of these standard anti-Semitic tropes that might remain the same throughout history, but the way they're employed is different. That's what makes our interpretation of of anti-Semitism, our study of anti-Semitism, I think, to be one of the better ones, because it's not just looking at anti-Semitism on its own, because it is its own form of racism, but it also is an engine that fuels other racisms. It provides an interconnected tissue that can relate anti-Black to anti-white, to anti-LGBTQ, to anti-immigrant. There is a connective tissue. And if you peel back the surface of these racisms, you can find anti-Semitism. It's not hard. So anti-Semitism is both a racism on its own and like an engine or a like vehicle for other forms of racism.
I know
And
I
that's
asked
because it has such a long.
I know I
Go
asked
ahead.
you about hope for the last question, but I think what
Oh
I have
yeah.
to ask you. No, no, it's okay. I have another
No,
question
I'll
here
go back.
about
I can say something hopeful.
okay, let me ask you this before I
This
ask you
too
something
shall
about hope.
pass.
Is there a danger in society becoming desensitized
Yes.
to domestic violence and
Yeah.
white supremacist ideology?
Totally. 100%.
Mm.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. 100%. There's already October 7th revisionists. Yeah. Like yeah. Like, yes. 100%.
And I feel like the danger and
Like,
stuff like that is that it doesn't take
look at any of
long.
these PragerU educational things. They're like, oh, here's my friend the Indian. He's so helpful. And we're like,
Mhm.
like just yeah. It's bad. It's bad. But again, the hope is education. There are professors out there. There are teachers out there. There are people who are dedicated to honest, open, discussive education, to making things better and more accessible. There are people who are doing that. There are organizations who are doing that. And as long as those people exist, there is a pathway to a better, more inclusive future. That I do believe.
Okay.
Whether we take it, whether it's a windy as hell path to get there, that's another story.
Hmm.
But those groups do exist. Those people do exist. It's just a matter of finding them and supporting them. So
Man,
I guess that's as hopeful as I'm going to get for you, bro.
no, no, I remember where we left off. I think it was in 2022, and this was like the same reaction at the end of the interview. Oh, okay.
Little did I know
Again.
how much 3 years is. But again, to be fair, I do spend a lot of time looking at this stuff. I do spend a lot of time analyzing this stuff, and it gives me a kind of clarity, right? It does give me a kind of clarity to the point where none of these extremist points are sustainable.
Hmm.
Extremism is unsustainable because it is not driven by logic. It is not driven by evidence. It is not driven by fact. It is driven by emotion. And that is true. That's why it appeals, right? I think the three most important emotions I used to teach about in terms of propaganda were anger, hatred, and hope. And you can use fear as a pathway to get to all of those. If you can make someone afraid enough that they're angry or hateful or even feel or pride, maybe not hope, maybe it was pride. I think it was pride, right? If you can make someone so fearful that they have to express this incredible pride in their, I don't know, like America, like an American nationalist or a Christian nationalist, that their ideology has no faults, that's a win. Then you've got them hooked,
And I
right?
feel like that's why we
So
always.
if you can get people on emotion, right? But that's again why it's so hard in these siloed environments, because here I can bring history and you know information and evidence, but I'm bringing it to an emotion fund.
Yeah.
That's like it's like showing up in the wrong. It's like it's not even being a gun to a knife fight. It's like planning out a knife fight and ending up, I don't know, at a pro wrestling match somewhere in another part of the country. It's just not in the same arena.
Hmm.
That was a terrible analogy, but I couldn't think of anything.
I feel like that's why we ultimately see authoritarian regimes fall because the people get tired. Like it just becomes
It's
redundant
not
and
sustainable.
negative. Yeah.
It's not sustainable. Does that mean they're not going to do real damage while they're here? No, they will. But does that mean there's also no possibility of recovery? No, there's an absolute possibility of recovery. It can happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
The question for us is when and will.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Again, my guest is Dr. Alon Milwicki. He is a senior research analyst on anti-Semitism at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Anytime, man.
Thank you everyone for watching this video here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. If you want more long-form content like this, such as interviews, exclusives, and specials, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. As always, you can follow us on Blue Sky and Substack at tjpsnews. You can send me an email directly to tjpsnews@gmail.com. As always, this is independent journalism, so please be sure to support the Jeremiah Patterson Show financially by either giving us a recurring or one-time donation at Cashapp at TJPS News or the following financial platforms. There also is a GoFundMe for the Jeremiah Patterson Show as well to support this work and also to sustain it in an era where journalism is under attack by authoritarians in the United States. Thank you everyone so very much for watching the TJPS Evening News Show. I will see you again this Friday.